Pull up a chair, let the cups clink soft. Little laugh in the corner, world talking on and off. Sip slow truth while the headlines drop. Welcome into Ken's Coffee Shop.
Hey everybody, welcome to Ken's Coffee Shop on this beautiful Sunday afternoon, the first day of March. It's coming in like a lamb, so we know what that means when we get to the end of the month. And we'll blame the groundhog for that too, I am sure. Hey, I want to remind everybody, if you want to get in contact with me, you can email me at KennyB@gmail.com. KENNYB seekingtruth@gmail.com. You can leave comments here during the show in the comment box. I invite my friends. Hey, you want to come on the show and discuss things live? Let me know. We can do it. Looking forward to having some people on here, so it's not always my pretty face you're looking at. Please, if you haven't done so, follow the Seeking Truth Facebook page. Seeking Truth has my beautiful picture up there. Actually, it has the meme up there, but you get the idea. Why is it called Seeking Truth and not Ken's Coffee Shop? Because I'm tired of telling people, no, we don't serve lattes. Also, make sure that you follow the Cole County Entertainment Facebook page, because it has links to all the shows as they are live. And we try to share those on my Facebook page, but make sure you follow that as well. And remember, as always, I can lead you to the truth, but I can't make you believe it. So last week, in reactions to last week we spent a lot of time talking about the Epstein files. And there was a little more on it this week. Bill and Hillary testified. Hillary testified she never met Epstein, despite pictures to the contrary. She explained why Ms. Maxwell was at Chelsea's wedding. Apparently, she was the plus one of somebody else. It wasn't Epstein. He was in jail, but that doesn't matter. Bill gave his testimony. Didn't remember who he was in the hot tub with. That famous picture of him in the hot tub at Epstein's. I don't know what it tells you. He doesn't remember. Was he in the hot tub with that many people? That he didn't remember who? But in any event, I didn't want to go through all of that again. But there was a couple of articles I read this week, and they came from unusual sources. One was the New York Times, that very right-wing leaning newspaper that always defends the president. Oh, right, that's not what the New York Times is. The New York Times did an article this week on how Trump appears in the Epstein files. And basically, New York Times was saying a little bit of what I was saying last week, was there's a lot of smoke, but there's no fire, folks. There are 38,000 mentions of Trump in the last dump of Epstein files. There were he was in 5,400 documents. The first dump had 130 documents. So he's been in over 5,500 documents, close to 40,000 mentions in those files. What does it mean by a mention in those files? Well, just like you might have done sometime when you're doing a find and replace in Word, or a find in Word, or in a PDF file. They basically just did a count of how many times his name, Melania's name, or Mar-a-Lago showed up in the Epstein files, mainly email files. And the New York Times then went through and actually analyzed these and found that most of them were actually emails that Epstein had received that had news articles. And I'm sure you get that in your inbox all the time. If you subscribe to any kind of services, they'll get a news article. They'll give you today's news. And if Trump is mentioned 6 times in that article, hey, he's in your email now 6 times. And that was it. There were very few documents at all that went back to the early 2000s when Trump and Epstein were still friends. Even Bill Clinton, in his testimony, indicated that it was his understanding that Trump and Epstein had a falling out in the early 2000s. There were zero emails from Donald Trump to Epstein. One reason for this, Donald Trump doesn't have email. Donald Trump has never had an email address. He loves to tweet, or loves to X, whatever the verb is for X these days, or he loves to Truth Social, but he doesn't do email. And so there aren't any emails between him and Epstein. He does have staff that does emails for him, but I'm pretty sure he wouldn't tell a staff member, hey, write an email to Epstein and tell him how good that teenage girl was last night. So none of those in there. The Times also went through these reports that the FBI had received unverified tips regarding Trump and Epstein. And for the most part, they found that the information was not corroborated. And there were things like, oh, Epstein took me to Mar-a-Lago to meet Trump and said, this is a good one, huh? Epstein said to Trump. But there's no indication in the notes that Trump said or did anything that was improper. In fact, Virginia Roberts, she met Epstein at Trump's. She worked for Trump at the time. And there's also reports in the FBI tips that Trump had visited Epstein's home. Well, we know that. They actually were close at one point in time. So the point is, we continue to see a lot of misinformation spread around the internet, especially Facebook, as I spend a lot of time on, but nothing really yet that has any kind of substance to it. The other thing was an article in The Economist. And again, The Economist is not a right-wing leaning source. It's not the Wall Street Journal. And what they did was very interesting. They took emails, put them on a timeline, and did a chart which showed the number of emails. But they did it going back and forth. Emails to Epstein, emails from Epstein. And so Bill Gates, you saw a chart where the top part, which was emails from Epstein, very, very high peaks, lots of numbers. Emails from Gates to Epstein, very few. And they were all pretty much in the past and nowhere near the number of emails to Epstein that Gates received from Epstein. And yet they would show up, every one of those emails would show up as a mention of Bill Gates. There was also another chart which showed his emails with a woman who was involved in the financial field. She had many more to him than he wrote back. And again, there was nothing in those other than business matters, but very interesting. If you can find that article from the Economist, very interesting to see the back and forth and try to put this all into perspective as to who was communicating to who about what. Now, I was going to start today. I always have plans. I was going to start today talking about the SAVE Act and voting, and we may still get to it, but we had a few things happen this week. And I'm sure you've all heard these words before. Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by the naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. Those words were uttered by Franklin D. Roosevelt on December 8th, 1941. That was 84 years ago. Little trivia. That was the last time a president of the United States requested and received from Congress a declaration of war. That was the last time we technically went to war. The Korean War was a police action. The Vietnam War was a conflict. It was loosely authorized under the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, but we never had a declaration of war. The Gulf War won? No declaration of war. Hell, we didn't have a declaration of war when we went to war with Grenada, one of those quick wars that we won under Reagan. There was no declaration of war against Afghanistan because we weren't fighting Afghanistan in Gulf II. We were fighting the terrorists. There wasn't even a declaration of war against Iraq, even though there we were going against the country. So the point is, it's been a long time since this country's been at war. But again, just yesterday, we dropped a whole bunch of ordnance on Iran Proved again the value of Zoom. Iran had much of its senior leadership wiped out as they were meeting. Had they had a Zoom meeting instead, it would have been harder to get them. Just wanted to point that out. And it's raised, again, a lot of people complaining about violation of the law. And the law they're talking about violating is the War Powers Act of 1973. It was passed really because of Richard Nixon. Interestingly, it was passed as the Vietnam War was winding down. It was passed by a Democratic Congress and a Republican president after the Vietnam War had been escalated under 5 years of Lyndon Johnson, a Democrat. And it was passed actually over the veto of the president. They were able to pick up a few additional Republicans in the House and override his veto, and it became law. And so everybody is up in arms saying that the president has violated the War Powers Act because it was not, they're saying there was no emergency. He should have notified Congress beforehand. He is required to notify them within 48 hours of his committing armed forces to military action. If they're watching the news, they're aware of it now. But there's an interesting thing is that we've had the War Powers Act probably violated 100 times. There have been over 100 reports actually given under the War Powers Act saying, hey, yeah, we sent some missiles through a tent in Libya yesterday to try to get Gaddafi, and we bombed an aspirin factory in Kosovo, and we had troops in Somalia and all those other places that we've been. The incursion in Panama, the infamous war against Grenada. That one doesn't count. That's sort of like a Division III football team going up against a Division I team. It was never a fair fight. And yet we have people that are complaining that the president violated the War Powers Act. And no president has ever been called to task by Congress for violation of the War Powers Act. And there may be a reason behind that. Many people, including myself, believe the War Powers Act might not be constitutional. And the reason for that is interesting. And I go back to that speech by Roosevelt. At the last line of the speech, I asked that the Congress declare that since the unprovoked and dastardly attack by Japan on Sunday, December 7th, 1941, a state of war has existed between the United States and the Japanese Empire. But a few paragraphs before that, he did mention, as Commander-in-Chief of the Army and Navy, we didn't have an Air Force at the time, folks, I have directed that all measures be taken for our defense. And that is the problem with the War Powers Act. You see, the Constitution gives the Congress some pretty obvious powers, including the power to declare war, the power to grant letters of marque and reprisal. Basically, it tells private citizens you can go out and capture enemy ships. Doesn't happen so much anymore. The power to raise and support armies for up to 2 years at a time. We didn't actually anticipate a standing army. Provide and maintain a navy. Make rules for the government and regulation of the land and naval forces. Call forth the militia. Make rules concerning captures on land and water. Provide for organizing, arming, and disciplining the militia, and govern such part of the militia as may be employed in the service of the United States. Section 8 of Article 1 also provides that Congress will have the power to appoint officers of the militia. That's why certain military officers have to be confirmed by Congress, and to train the militia according to the discipline provided by Congress. I haven't seen many congressmen out there on the firing line lately trying to teach soldiers to be marksmen, but you get the feeling. So from that, hey, Congress has to declare war. Congress has to provide for the Navy. They have to raise and support an army. So clearly, the president can't go off and act on his own. And clearly, he's violating the War Powers Act. Except Jimmy Madison, the guy who wrote the Declaration of Independence, the guy who wrote the Constitution, James Madison is responsible for most of the Constitution. He probably didn't anticipate every single thing that could happen. Article 2, Section 2 of the Constitution provides the president shall be the commander-in-chief of the Army and Navy of the United States. Again, no Air Force in Madison's time. I think he had a brain freeze from eating Dolly Madison's ice cream, but that's neither here or there. When I was growing up as a kid, there was actually a brand of ice cream, Dolly Madison. I don't know if it's still made. But the president is the commander-in-chief. And nobody disagrees. The president can use the military to repel any attacks against the United States. Except there aren't too many attacks against the United States. It's a great thing about basically being an ocean away from most of the rest of the world we have to worry about. And so the president, we know, has the power of defense. Well, there's nothing in the Constitution that says the president doesn't have the power of offense. There's nothing in the Constitution that says you need a declaration of war in order to use the military. In fact, that's more a question of international law and the fact that you normally no. To answer the question being asked, no, Truman didn't have to get congressional okay to drop the atom bomb because a state of war existed as of December 8th, 1941, or FDR would say it actually existed as of December 7th, that we were just acknowledging that in our declaration of war. So within a war, president as the commander-in-chief didn't need to get congressional approval. Maybe it would have been possible back then. Can you imagine today with the leaks we have? I mean, even in a closed door deposition of Clinton the other day, Lorena Bobbitt, should be Boebert. Yes, why do I get Boebert and Boebert mixed up? But Boebert issued sent out a video or a still picture of Clinton testifying, violated House rules, violated the whole concept of a closed hearing. But can you imagine today if you had to go to Congress to get permission to drop the bomb? It would be on CNN before the plane took off. But no, you did not have to get permission. So the point is that it's not clear that the president violates the War Powers Act by obliterating Iran. He violated the War Powers Act he violated the War Powers Act. It's not clear that it is meaningful because it's not clear that the War Powers Act is constitutional and valid. Probably violated the act by sending troops in to capture the leader of Venezuela. But it raises that debate again over the president's powers, and we're seeing more and more an imperial presidency. It's funny because the War Powers Act was enacted because everybody said that Nixon had created the imperial presidency. The presidents after him had said, Richard, hold my beer, because we've seen things that, the overreach by the president without getting authorization has definitely increased over time. The governing by executive order being a part of this, even on the issue that I'm sure I'm not going to get to because of matter of time, but next week we will. The issue about voting and voting fraud and all of that. Trump is threatening by executive order to issue rules regarding this year's congressional election, even though there is no authority for the president to do so. It's not even clear that the congressional authority to govern certain aspects of the election of senators and representatives allows them to do what they want to do. But clearly, you can't do it by executive order. But that's what we've been seeing. We've been seeing an increase in the imperial presidency. We saw immigration policy made by executive order. We saw new categories of immigrants under different acts and under different programs. We've seen new classifications of immigrants created by executive order, people that were allowed under the DREAM Act to stay in this country. And then the president, by executive order, expands those that are going to be kept in the country, expands those that will not be removed immediately. And we've seen a lot of legislation by executive order because Congress doesn't legislate. And so somebody wants, I was actually going to get to that next comment. Understanding that we may or may not have a violation of the president's rights, his powers. Do we believe the current moves were good or bad? If we had done this a few weeks ago, I would have been all for it. And I would have been all for it because at that time, we would have been doing it to try to save the 30,000 or more people who have died in protests in Iran. I mean, it's the way they treated protesters, people that they failed to kill in the protests themselves, who were taken to hospitals, were then executed in the hospital. We've seen thousands of people executed for no reason other than protesting against the government, including people that really weren't even parts of the protest, just happened to find themselves in the wrong place. I would have been all for it back then. I'm not sure of the timing. I'm not sure why it had to happen yesterday. It was actually a pretty darn good misdirection play on the part of the president. We were negotiating with Iran. It looked like Iran was actually agreeing to what we were asking of them. The president left Washington, so he's away from the Situation Room. He goes to Texas for a political stop, then goes down to Mar-a-Lago. The Iranians probably relaxed a little bit. That's probably why the top leadership were meeting in one place and not doing it over Zoom. And we launched the attacks. Whether this is the U.S. and Israel is going to assist us, or it's Israel and we go along for the ride, I'll let other people decide. But we've been trying to destabilize the Iranian government for probably since 1979. You have to go back. If you're going to look at whether this is good or bad, and not everybody who watches this was around in 1979 when the Shah was driven from power and the Ayatollah returned from Paris, took over, imposed, religious fundamentalism in Iran, and then a short time later gave birth to the hostage crisis, where a group of students broke into the embassy and took Americans hostage, created Nightline, because it started off with Ted Koppel doing those nightly reports on the hostage crisis, and then it became a 30 or 40 year news show out of it. But it goes back to them because Iran was always a very strong ally of ours in the Middle East under the Shah. And when the area was destabilized by the Ayatollah coming in, it created problems for us. It created strange bedfellows. As we know, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And so we became friends at that time with Iraq because Iraq was in a war with Iran. And then, of course, we were in a war with Iraq, and then all the stuff with Iran, and the Iran getting the nuclear capability and different treaties, and Iran not following through on some of the responsibilities under those treaties and all that stuff, brought us to where we are today, where, one, we still view Iran as a nuclear threat in an area where they want to destroy Israel, and somebody with nuclear capability could possibly do that quite easily. Also, there's the human rights side of it that, we were seeing people murdered by the Iranian regime. And you've got to decide for yourself, does the U.S. have a role as a police keeper for the world? Can we launch military action like this simply to protect the citizens internally in another country? And we've done enough of it. I mean, that's why we were involved in the in the war in Kosovo and in Herzegovina. That's why we were involved in Somalia. That's why we were involved in many places, is because of what was being done to the civilian populace. So that's another reason. Yeah, so it's probably a justified action. Whether it's good or bad, and I'm not trying to hedge the question, but whether it's good or bad is probably going to depend upon exactly how long this lasts, what the losses are. Iran is trying to fight back. They did hit a few U.S. bases. We've had at least 3 casualties in one base that was hit. But if it results in regime change, and especially if it results in regime change that is not as extreme as the Iranian government has been, then I think it probably will be a good thing. Also, the relatives of the Shah are still trying to get themselves back on the throne. It would be great to have another ally in that area. For years, Iran was our strongest ally because we helped support the Shah. And it's going to be very interesting to see what happens to oil prices over the next few days. I'm glad I gassed up on the weekend, but I don't know. We're going to have to see. And we're going to have, I think, a lot of toing and froing over the next couple weeks from people in Congress and other political leaders. I mean, we've got to the point, we've politicized everything in this country, including war, including actions we take like this, to the extent where our governor in Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro, put out a one-page statement yesterday. Why a governor? Although Shapiro, you would think he would have been supporting Israel, but why a governor is coming out and blasting military action? There's only one reason. He's a candidate in 2028. Just like Newsom in California, everything that happens on a national level, even though it has nothing to do with their job as governor, they're going to comment on it. We saw some members, Republican members of Congress, have come out against this action. And it's not clear ever whether they're against the action or are we against the action because you didn't ask us in Congress. And that's going to be the overriding theme. It probably, I'm willing to say it's more likely than not that if the Democrats regain the House in November, violation of the War Powers Act will be one of the grounds that they will cite for impeachment. I'm expecting that. Just like the Cambodian incursion, even though it was pre-War Powers Act, was one of the things that was listed for Nixon. He brought the war into Cambodia, that undeclared war that we had committed 500,000 troops to under Johnson suddenly became a bad thing because we were bombing Cambodia and we had some troops going through there. You're gonna see some of that. I do support the state of Israel. Israel is a strong ally in the region. It doesn't make pragmatic sense because they don't have oil. But this whole thing is going to be again about trying to stabilize the region that produces so much oil. And I'm not really sure where this leads. I don't think Iran can wage a long-term war against anybody, against the type of power they're going to face from the United States, from Israel. And their counterattacks, while yes, any deaths are bad, but their counterattacks just aren't as effective as you would need to be to defend yourself against this. It sort of is like Grenada fighting the United States when it comes down to that. Oh, I definitely believe that Shapiro will be a candidate for president. I think that the fact that he was mentioned as a vice presidential candidate last time around is going to has really heightened his exposure and increased his ambition. I'm not really sure what he's ever done that people think he would make a great president. I mean, he's not too many years removed from being a county commissioner and then an attorney general. But hey, we had a reality star become president, so I guess you can. Another question here. Impeachment is a normal thing nowadays. When did that start? Started in 1998 with the impeachment of Bill Clinton. And then, of course, we had the double impeachment of Trump. And, we have people running for Congress back in, must have been 2018, because Trump had already been president. Somebody running for Congress, Representative Omar, who said we're going to impeach the MF. Impeachment has become the normal thing. And that's what we're going to see. We're going to see this war effort is going to be turned into a political effort. And it's going to definitely keep rearing its head. It'll be an issue in November. And if it is quick and it's successful and we get regime change and we get better human rights treatment of people, it's going to be hard for the Democrats, although consistency and a lack of hypocrisy is not important for either party these days. But it's going to be hard for Democrats to stand up and complain that Trump, through his actions, has improved the life of Iranian women. Because you still can die in Iran for not wearing the proper clothing. We've seen that happen. And I think what we're going to see is, if it is a successful action, if it's short, and I'm talking about it's cleared up within the month of March, came in like a lion. If Iran goes out like a lamb and we see positive change there, I think it's actually going to be beneficial for the president. And I think it'll be a positive thing for the Republicans who don't try to jump ship right now. And Senator Rand Paul being a very loud critic of the actions. But what we're going to have to see, but I do think, to answer the question that was asked there, I do think impeachment has become the norm. We had people wanting to impeach Biden over stuff. People wanted to everything. They want to impeach Supreme Court justices. They want to impeach everybody. And we're going to, if the Democrats get control of the House, we are going to see more wasted time on impeachment. Why is it wasted time? Because the Democrats are not going to get 67 votes in the Senate. In fact, it wasn't even clear that they were going to get 67 votes back in 1974 against Richard Nixon, although Barry Goldwater famously told him that he could only guarantee him 10 votes. But we're going to have to wait and see. But a great question, because it does show the tie between this action that's being taken, the political environment that we're in, and the fact that we're going to have an election that's going to really impact how the politics move into the future. So, great question, and I do welcome. I love these questions as we're going on. Forces me to prove that I'm live too, and that I'm actually thinking on my feet, which is good. I actually got to none of this week's agenda, which is a perfect way to do a show. Iran ended up taking it all up, and maybe that's not so bad. We will, in a future show, talk about the SAVE Act. We will talk about gerrymandering. We will talk about voter ID. We're going to talk about civility in politics after what we saw with the State of the Union and other things. And something else that came up this week that I want to talk about in the future is the state of Colorado. Democrats in the Colorado legislature have introduced legislation to make Colorado the first state, because in Nevada, it's only in very small areas. Colorado, the first state to legalize prostitution. I guess it came up after they were one of the first to legalize weed, but very, very interesting topic, because it's one topic where I'm going to be able to show you guys that I have my chops as a true libertarian. Not the libertarian as people use the word these days with a capital L and all that stuff, but true libertarian, hookers and hookahs. Let people smoke what they want, let people do what they want, and we'll have that in another show too. But my time is up. We've run over a little bit once again. I can't wait to talk to you again next week. We're going to be on at noon next week rather than 1 o'clock, because I've got tickets for a musical. I'm going to see 42nd Street in Rehoboth, Delaware. So see you at noon next Sunday. Until then, we'll keep the coffee on, and everybody have a great week.
Pull up a chair, let the cups clink soft. Little laugh in the corner, world talking on and off. Sip slow truth while the headlines drop. Welcome into Canada.